Hello, welcome to True Crime Talk. This is Kathleen, and in this video, I am going to be talking about the Lane Bryant murders. The Lane Bryant murders happened back in 2008. It was on a Saturday, February 2nd. The Lane Bryant store was located in Tinley Park, Illinois, which is like a suburb of Chicago. It was located at Brookside Marketplace, the Lane Bryant store, and it was it's a strip mall there in Tinley Park, Illinois. This crime took 5 women's lives and injured a sixth victim who survived. Though apparently the one woman, the sixth victim, survived after being shot because she turned her neck, and so the bullet only grazed her. So she happened to turn her neck at just the right time, and apparently the bullet only grazed her. So that's how she survived. It's believed that the gunman posed as a delivery driver. At least one of the victims was SA'd, and this crime took place at about 10:45 a.m. in the morning, or the police received the call at about 10:45 a.m. The gunman was described as a black male with thick cornrows and a receding hairline. He was about 5 feet 9 inches tall, about 230 to 260 pounds. He was wearing a knit cap. He had on a black coat and dark jeans. And of course, it was February, so it was cold outside, so a black coat would have been normal. So when he walked into the store, and police believe, but they don't know for sure, but they believe that it was thought by either the store manager who was killed or other people in the store that he was a delivery driver. The police believed at the time that it was possibly a robbery gone awry. But apparently the perp spent a lot of time in the store, like 40 minutes, I believe it was. And so that's a long time for a robber to spend in a store. But he did have several victims in the store, and he did SA at least one victim. So maybe that's why he spent a long time, but that is unusual for just a regular, robbery. If anybody's ever been, worked at a fast food restaurant or a store that got robbed, you know that usually they're in and out pretty quick if you get robbed. And I speak from experiences on this. When I was a young person working at a Primo's Pizza restaurant that used to be here in Georgia, our location got robbed. And of course, it was traumatic because it was the first time I had ever really been a victim of crime. And I was young and dumb and naive, and I had lived a sheltered life. So that experience was scary for me at the time. Of course, it's always scary whenever anybody would point a gun at you. But I think today, being older and wiser, and I would react differently. But of course, back then I was panicked. I remember gripping the back of my boss who owned the pizza restaurant. And we were all young people who worked at the pizza restaurant. So my boss was 23, and I think he was the oldest person there. He was the owner. He graduated from college and bought his own pizza restaurant. He is very, ambitious. And so everybody who worked there, we were all young. I was 17 or 18 at the time. I was actually a pizza delivery person. I delivered pizzas back in the day before, I didn't have GPS maps or anything like that. Cell phones, I didn't have a cell phone. I used old-fashioned maps. Didn't have constant communication with anybody. I didn't have a cell phone. So, and people worried about me getting robbed while I was delivering pizza because I was a young female by myself. I mean, I had customers worry about me and stuff, my mother and stuff. But I personally would never fear because I was young and dumb, and I was never a victim of crime. So I just, thought crime was something that happened to other people. On TV, I used to love Unsolved Mysteries, the TV show. And so, crime was I was aware of crime, but it wasn't something that happened in my life. So after that event, it took me a long time to even realize how serious of an event that was because I was so young and dumb. I just went to work the next night, didn't even really think too much about it. But what happened at the store I worked at was that two robbers came in the front doors of the pizza restaurant with guns. They pointed a gun. I mean, they put it right up to the head of the young girl who was the cashier. And I wasn't on a delivery, unfortunately. I happened to be there in the store at the time in the kitchen area. There was like one customer there sitting at a table. We had a few tables in the front there. And so they made her get up. They got the cashier who they pointed the gun at, and all the cooks, and my boss, and myself go to the very back room, which was a very small room, the little office there, and they had us line up. And of course, I was panicking. I thought we were just all going to be shot to death. But what they did was they just lined us up, and they went to each one of us, stealing money, purses, wallets, and jewelry. I happened to have like over $100 in my pockets at the time because I was a delivery driver. And back then, most people paid cash. It was a cash business or check business, like the old, a lot of people don't even write checks today, but it was back then when people wrote handwritten checks and didn't use debit or credit cards as much as they do today. And so when the one of the robbers was standing to the side holding the gun, and when the other guy who was walking, down the line of us, and it was, I want to say maybe 7, 8 of us there lined up in the very small back room. I mean, he worked quickly, and so he didn't check my pockets or anything. And I actually had started, because they said, give us all your money. I started to take the money out of my pocket like the dummy I was, because I wasn't thinking, it's there hidden in my pocket. They don't know it's there. I'm a girl. I didn't have a purse on me. My purse was in my car. And so they didn't know I was a delivery driver and had cash on me because, I'm panicked, young and dumb. And so I started taking my money out of my pocket to give it to him. But he was so rushed. He didn't see the money I was trying to, I guess, hand over to him because I didn't want to get shot. He just ripped the gold heart pendant necklace I had on my neck off. So that's all they got from me. But anyway, then they proceeded to run out the back door. So they came in the front door and they ran out the back door. And it was over like less than 5 minutes, maybe 3 minutes or less. I mean, it happened quickly, but it seemed like eternity to me because I was scared to death, as was everybody else there with me, I assume. And I'll get more into that later of why, maybe not everybody who was my coworkers weren't as afraid as I was. But I didn't realize that until probably years later when I had an epiphany about life. And I thought back to that time and what had happened at the time I was working at a pizza restaurant and we got robbed. So anyway, back to the Lane Bryant murders. The 5 victims were Jennifer Bishop, 34, Carrie Hudek, Chiuso, 33, and I know I'm butchering these names, but anyway, it's Jennifer Bishop, 34, Carrie Hudek, Chiuso, 33, Rhoda McFarland, 42, and she was the store manager. Sarah Szafranski, 22, she was the youngest person there, and Connie Woolfolk was 37. So those were the 5 victims who got killed. There was one more victim, I don't know her name, who survived the robbery or the event, whatever it was, a robbery gone wrong or whatever it was. The police withheld the name of the surviving victim, and she was apparently a part-time employee of the store. And I believe she was in her 20s, but I'm not sure because, like, I haven't been able to find a lot of information on her because she, to my knowledge, has never gone public that I know of. This is the Tinley Park Police website, and they have a page about this crime on their website. It says the Lane Bryant homicide investigation. It says the Tinley Park Police Department and the South Suburban Major Crime Task Force have released a composite likeness of the offender in the Lane Bryant investigation. The computer-generated likeness was developed by the Illinois State Police, which worked closely with the surviving victim of the crime. The description of the physical characteristics of the offender has not changed. However, the new composite reveals a more lifelike depiction of the offender, and there's a picture to the right that you can see. The public is reminded that the offender remains at large and should be considered armed and dangerous. A $100,000 reward has been established for information leading to the arrest of the offender. The reward is not dependent upon conviction. Any information will be kept confidential. So if anybody knows anything, they could get a $100,000 reward, and it doesn't even have to um, be based on a conviction. In other words, let's say if the guy in the composite is the actual suspect who committed these murders and they find him all these years later, but let's say he's deceased or in prison for other crimes or whatever, or he never goes to trial because they don't have evidence or witnesses or whatever, you could still get $100,000. Maybe they have DNA for, like, if this crime gets solved and the perp is deceased, they can still solve it because they have DNA already, and then they find the person that matches that DNA, so they know that's the person who committed the crime. Kind of like the yogurt shop murders in Texas, where those several girls, I think it was 4, I could be wrong, were murdered in the yogurt shop, and one or more of them were also SA'd, and they found out years later who the perp was. But he was already deceased, so there's never justice for the family, but at least they solved the case according to the police. So maybe this case can be solved, but who knows if actual justice will be gotten, because who knows where the perp is or if he's already deceased or how old he is or what his health condition is. But that's what I'm not sure about in this case, if they have DNA and what kind of DNA do they have. Is it like bodily fluid DNA, or have they gone back and tested some evidence for touch DNA and stuff like that? I'm not sure if they have DNA at this point or not. It says, click here to see and download the Lane Bryant Wanted poster and reward information. So I'm going to click on that and see if I can get yeah, so here's the reward poster. It's $100,000 reward. And these are the original sketches that they did right after the crime. And then I don't know how many years later, but they did this composite with a 3-dimensional likeness that's on the right there. Let's see, it says the suspect entered the Lane Bryant women's clothing store on February 2nd, 2008, shooting and killing 5 women during an armed robbery. The weapon used was a .40 caliber semi-automatic. The offender was a male, black, 6 foot to 6'2", and that's different than what I've read before. I think in another article, in a news article I read, it was 5'10", but this is the police wanted poster, so maybe this is more accurate. So according to this wanted poster, he was 6 foot to 6'2", so he's a tall man, husky build, broad shoulders, weight proportionate to height, believed to be between 25 to 35 years of age, medium to dark skin tone, hair braided with 3 to 5 puffy cornrows pulled back toward the back of the head. One braid hung down the right cheek and has 4 light green beads on the end. So obviously, if this perp is still out there, he wouldn't necessarily have the same hairstyle, but if anybody remembers somebody who looked like that back then, that could help possibly. His clothing that he wore was dark in color below the waist-length jacket, black jeans with embroidery on the back pocket similar to a cursive G. The suspect was also wearing a charcoal gray ski skull cap. And it says the suspect's voice can be listened to by calling a toll-free number 1-866-853-6222. So apparently, I guess that still works. If you call that number, you can listen to his voice, but also you can click here to hear the 911 call of his voice. So we'll listen to it. Let me try again. Here it is.
911 emergency.
Something to do, huh? That up here. I'm looking at bullshit.
A man named Charlie Min has done a documentary about these murders. I'm not sure if it's out yet. It comes out soon, according to the documentary website. It says, for any information on this case, please email charliedocs36@gmail.com. But apparently this man right here, he's a documentary filmmaker, and he focuses on crimes, unsolved crimes. And apparently he has other documentaries out. I'm not sure if I've ever watched one of his documentaries or not. I'm not sure which ones he's done, but of course I'm into true crime, so I probably have seen some of his work. But so apparently this will be able to buy or stream on Amazon Prime Video at some point in the future. But before that, or maybe at the same time, it's going to actually be played in theaters in the Chicago area. Like this is Chicago, AMC River East 21, Crestwood, Illinois, AMC Crestwood 18. Then it gives the whole list of other theaters in Illinois, and there's one in Wisconsin where his documentary will be able to be seen. Let's click on this story. It says, on February 2nd, 2008, a coward executed 5 women inside an Illinois department store and vanished. And then there's a poster about the movie, Who Killed These Women, the Tinley Park 5. Let's watch the trailer, see if we can watch the trailer.
We're at Tinley Park. Hurry. Stay on the line. Stay on the line. Let me get you to Tinley Park. Don't hang up.
Something to do, huh? Shut up, dude. I'm looking at
Approximately 29 years of age, 29 years of age. There's black jeans with beaded or jewels on the black side, black or dark colored coat with a hat. Got one blade coming out of his hat with beads on it. Unknown automatic weapon.
Go, go, go!
Okay, it says it opened February 2nd, but on here it says coming soon. So maybe it's already available on Amazon Prime Video. So I'll be looking for that to see if I can find it so I can watch it. Maybe if you have a subscription to Prime, you can get it for free with your subscription. And if not, maybe we can rent it or buy it. But here's an interview with him from News Nation.
Tomorrow marks 18 years since unthinkable horror unfolded in a suburban Chicago shopping center. It was just after 10 a.m. on February 2nd, 2008, Groundhog Day, when a man who said he was a delivery driver walked into a Lane Bryant store, pulled out a .40 caliber Glock, and forced the 4 women inside into the back room. He bound their hands with duct tape, and when 2 more shoppers came into the store, he grabbed and did the same to them. At 10:44, the store manager, Rhoda McFarland, managed to make a 911 call on her cell phone, and in it, the suspect's voice can be heard in the background. Take a listen.
911 emergency.
Just 2 minutes later, a Tinley Park police officer was on that scene, but it was already too late. By then, the 6 women had all been shot execution style. 5 of them died, with 1 sole survivor. Police say she actually turned her head just in time as the shooter pulled the trigger. From that surviving woman's description, police created this 3D composite sketch. It went out nationwide. But to this day, this case still remains unsolved. The killer's still out there somewhere. And now a new film is hoping to change that, directed by our next live guest here in studio, Charlie Min. Tonight, his documentary, Who Killed These Women? The Tinley Park 5, dives into this cold case, hoping to track down the killer nearly 2 decades after the fact. And Charlie joins us tonight. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And tomorrow, of course, marks 18 years since these tragic murders. What has made this case in particular so challenging to solve?
First of all, when have you ever heard of an unsolved mass shooting before? This is a tough one. This is by far the most confusing mass shooting I've researched. I've done a lot of mass shooting documentaries. This whole thing doesn't make sense. Why would you rob a Lane Bryant on a Saturday morning when there's not much cash in there? So many questions surround this thing. Was this an inside?
That's very true. Why would somebody rob it that early in the morning on a Saturday? Like, was it a serial killer, a mass killer who just wanted to kill people, and or wanted to kill women specifically, so he targeted a women's clothing store? Was he after some money? Was it both? He wanted to rob them, but he also wanted to kill them for the hell of it. And also, a pervert, because they say one of them was SA'd, but I don't know what evidence they have that showed that they have actual physical evidence, like DNA evidence. I mean, I don't know how they know that somebody was SA'd for sure. Because some people think this crime was an inside job, which this man's fixing to talk about, the documentary filmmaker. A lot of people think because the one survivor was able to survive with just a graze, she turned her head and it grazed her neck, the bullet, apparently. They think that maybe she was in on it, like she knew the killer or was somehow involved. But apparently the police don't think so, because after all these years, they've never, arrested her, obviously, or considered her a suspect that I know of. But a lot of people out there in true crime world think that the person who survived the shooting was in on it, involved in it, or that she did it herself, which could very well, it makes sense, because it is my understanding from everything I've read so far that her information is the only eyewitness information that gave a description of the perp. So in other words, the sketches that they have of the perp and what he looked like and the way he was dressed is from her. So is she being accurate, or was it somebody? I mean, obviously there's a male voice inside the Lane Bryant shop, but did she describe the person accurately, or did he totally look different than what she said? and she knows who it is because it was one of her friends, boyfriends, or whatever. And maybe, she just wanted to rob the store, because you always got to consider an inside job, especially when somebody survives and all the others don't. Because the others are all dead, so they can't say, yeah, she was in on it. So did she and somebody else work together and they didn't want to leave any witnesses, because the witnesses would have known that she was in on it. Back when I was in the early 1990s, when I got robbed working at a Primo's pizza place, a few days after we got robbed, one of my male coworkers came up to me and asked me, how much is your insurance company going to pay for your gold pendant heart necklace? And I said I didn't have insurance on it. It wasn't worth that much. I just thought he was like a concerned coworker or whatever. I didn't think anything of it because I was young and dumb and, led a very sheltered life. But years later, I had the epiphany. I guess, as life goes on, you get more jaded and cynical. I had the epiphany that, oh my God, the reason my coworker asked me that question was because he wanted to know how much that gold necklace was worth, because he was in on the robbery. He wasn't one of the two guys who came in and robbed us, but he apparently knew them, or maybe possibly was in a gang with them or whatever. And so he was trying to find out information for them, how much that gold necklace was worth. I guess they wanted to, sell it, pawn it, whatever. And so, I had that epiphany, and I'm like 99.99, if not 100% sure that's why he asked me about that. See, at the time, I thought nothing of it, just a coworker wanting to know. But then I realized, I didn't. Years later, I just had this epiphany because, I was into true crime and watching true crime shows and, hearing about robberies and stuff. And then I just realized, it just hit me like, oh my God, my coworker was in on the robbery. It was the inside job. Luckily, nobody was killed at that Primo's pizza robbery that night, but it makes me think, in this case, could this have been something similar, just a robbery? Then, for whatever reason, it also turned into an SA and a murder because they wanted no witnesses. And could the sixth victim who survived have been in on it? But she could just totally be an innocent victim and just totally got lucky to survive, and he did not realize that he left somebody alive. That happens too. She was just a young woman. I believe she was a nursing student and I think a single parent at the time. So, I mean, she was young, or, some place I read she was 23, another place I read she was 33. So I'm not exactly sure how old she was, but she was working at Lane Bryant part-time, and she survived a horrific crime. So a lot of people think she possibly was in on it. And so that could be, and this documentary filmmaker discusses that.
A job, was one of the victims targeted? There's never been a single arrest made on this tragedy. And Tinley Park PD, if you ask me, has not done the job. The results are not there. This case is unsolved. I think we need a whole new set of eyes on this thing.
Okay. In the nearly 2 decades since this happened, there have been major developments in DNA testing, for example. What have you learned about forensic evidence on this scene? Is there any? Has it been retested?
Well, that's just it. Tinley Park PD, they're just not communicating. So basically, there's a lot of guessing going on here because they just won't get back to most media out.
Oh, so that's why I can't find any information about DNA, because the police haven't released any of that information.
Outlets. I would say there was DNA left behind because one of the victims fought back, Connie Woolfolk, and apparently there was some evidence underneath her fingernails that might have been from the killer. The killer walked in with duct tape and ordered all the victims to be tied up, whether he did it or had someone do it for him. I'm sure there's DNA on that duct tape. He also walked in with drinking coffee, so the cup may have had something, maybe some of the case shellings from the gun. So again, I wish I could tell you how much evidence was left behind, but again, no communication from Tinley Park PD, which has made this thing that much tougher.
You actually spoke with the very first paramedic who was on that scene. He was responding to a different call as these killings unfolded. He says his sirens were blasting nearby as the 911 call was made from inside the store. Let's take a quick listen to that together.
The one thing that finding this out is I know that they were listening to my siren when I was driving into the Target. That means that they were in that store and they were in that situation. And I drove nearly in front of the store until I got to the Target.
With the sirens?
With the sirens, to move cars out of my way so I could get it.
So perhaps the killer thought that was the police coming in for him.
It's one of my biggest fears.
That is so chilling, the idea that the killer could have been thinking they were moving in on him.
Right.
And of course, we know the catastrophic actions that that killer took shortly afterwards. Tell me more about this documentary. What were some of the major revelations, the major ways that you feel you were able to push this case forward?
Well, the film is a clean sweep of what I believe happened that day based on intense research. We interviewed the first 3 paramedics that were on the scene. Some key family members who really talk about how it affected them. We also interviewed 2 former police officers. Because Tinley Park PD couldn't talk, I had to go to other avenues to try to get some type of law enforcement presence into the film. So we also interviewed former Lane Bryant employees. One of them knew the survivor, whose name is Marty.
Tell me more about this survivor. Tell me about the circumstances of how she survived, because I mean, it just sent a chill through me when you were telling me more about this. And also, she's never spoken publicly. What have we learned about her?
Yeah, this is the $64,000 question, is the survivor. Her name is Marty. She's 51 years old. She was a nursing student at the time. She's from Kentucky. I've gotten so many people emailing the website, thetinley5.com, about who they think it is. I've gotten pictures sent to me where she might be today. I tracked down her ex-husband.
What does he say?
He told me that he wouldn't be much help because they got a divorce right before the shooting. So they haven't talked in maybe 20 years or so.
Yeah.
So you see, he, like me and many others in the true crime world, think that the person who survived could have more information. So it makes sense. It is odd that she's never come forward publicly, but who knows what, direction her life went in, and who knows how badly this could have affected her to see the 5 of her coworkers shot to death. But it is kind of suspicious. And if she's 51 and she's never spoken publicly before, maybe she should at this point, if she's mentally healthy, to just help solve this crime publicly, because obviously the police haven't solved it yet. So obviously this case needs some help.
So the lone survivor is the key to this whole thing, because all the information we're getting comes from her, because she's the only one who survived.
Yeah.
And I've had people actually tell me that they think that she was actually in on it, because how in the world can everyone die right away from gunshots and she has a grazed wound to her neck? Now,
do you feel like that's a fair accusation?
I can see where they're coming from, and I'm certainly not sitting here telling you that she is in on it. But I mean, right now I'm grasping at straws because I'm so desperate to get answers. And I wish she could be re-interviewed. I wish we could talk to her. She doesn't have to give her name.
And
or
I'm sure you wish
face.
that the forensics, that the DNA will be re-examined and that a fresh team will look at this. Charlie, we're almost out of time tonight, but I just want to touch on something actually fairly personal and fairly tender. You mentioned to our producers that you have dedicated this film to one person in particular. We're pulling up her photo now. I know that you are doing this interview with me tonight through TV.
Okay, and that's basically the end of that video. You can go to the website, the Tinley Park 5, to see more information about his documentary and this video. What the video discusses is why he felt compelled to do this video and why he's so passionate about it. And his mother recently died, and he's said that he did it for her. So I'm interested to find out what other documentaries he's done, because I like to watch them, and I want to watch this one. I'll be, I guess, going to Amazon Prime Video to see if I can find it. So this is the website, and this is the shopping center today where this crime took place. It did reopen. I think it was like about 5 years later, but it became a TJ Maxx, and they did some like redecorating, and they made it look a little different. Years ago, when the crime happened, there's still a Sally right there, but this nail place wasn't there. And it was all glass windows in the Lane Bryant, and they didn't have this front to it. Same kind of bricks and stuff, but see, so they totally changed it, I guess, because who wants to shop at a store that hasn't been redid after something so awful happened like that? But so today it's a TJ Maxx, and life goes on. But in 2008, 5 women were murdered for no good reason. So this case needs to be solved. When thinking about who could have committed this crime, you got to look at the victims and what all was going on in their lives. Could one of the victims have had a husband or boyfriend or somebody else in their life who wanted to do them harm, and then the others were just collateral damage? And by the way, several of these victims had children. They left behind young children. This woman right here in the white, Jennifer Bishop, she had, I believe it's 3 children, young children, who had to grow up without her in their life. And she was an ICU nurse, and she was married. And I believe Connie Woolfolk also had children. I believe it's Connie who had a disabled child with cerebral palsy. And so that child had to grow up without his mom in his life or her life. And I think Sarah was a college student or had just recently graduated college. And I think she worked at an insurance company with her father. So a lot of parents, children, grandparents, and siblings lost people in this crime. 5 people with families. So a lot of people suffered that day, not just these 5 victims and the 6th victim, but all of their families suffered. So could one of these women have had somebody in their life who wanted to do them harm, and somebody came, like, was somebody hired to go into the store to kill one of them and ended up having to kill all of them to avoid having any witnesses? But the surviving victim, to my knowledge, well, the police haven't released a lot of information, but to my knowledge, the police have never said anything about the surviving victim saying that the man was recognized by anybody. So apparently the 5 women who got killed didn't know the person who shot them necessarily, but could he have been hired by somebody they did know? I assume the women were all together and they would have heard conversations that the man had. If he would have known one of these victims, the 6th victim probably would have overheard or realized that. Or maybe the 6th victim would have recognized, if it was like, let's say, her boss, the manager of the store who was killed, if it was like somebody the manager knew, a boyfriend or something like that, could the 6th victim have already known him, have seen him before, or known him by name? So apparently not. So either this man was a complete stranger and didn't know any of these women, or the victim who survived is lying because she knows him and she was in on it. And the other possibilities are, of course, it's just a random killer, serial killer, and they were in the wrong place at the wrong time, and he walked in maybe thinking 1 or 2 women would be working there, and these customers start coming in on a Saturday morning around 10 a.m. and he stayed in the store apparently about 45 minutes. So that is a long time. But if he SA'd 1 or more of them, that takes time. And so apparently, he didn't just line them up and shoot them right away. So that makes me think it wasn't just a robbery, that he had other motives. It could be that he was a robber and just a psychopath who just wanted to torture them and just not kill them right away. I mean, we don't know exactly what went on in the store other than what the sixth victim has told the police, but the police hasn't released that information. Now, maybe this documentary film will have, more information, but obviously the police isn't cooperating with the documentary filmmaker, and the surviving victim wasn't interviewed for this documentary, so I don't know if we're really going to have any more information about this crime. But I know the documentary still be useful, and I'll probably learn some stuff I don't know about this crime. But just from my reading, there's not a lot of information about the DNA, what DNA, who was sexually assaulted. Was it one of the ones who got shot to death, or was it the one who got just a bullet graze and survived? So not only did she see her not her five friends, there's her coworker was the manager. So her one coworker who got killed, and then the others were just shoppers. So I believe only the store manager and the victim who survived were the ones working there, and all the four other victims were just shoppers there. So did an angry ex-boyfriend or stalker follow one of these women to the store and just ended up trying to take out all the other witnesses? And, maybe one of these women were stalked and didn't know they were being stalked. Maybe it's just a stranger to them, but he had been stalking one of these women, and that's how he ended up at the Lane Bryant store that Saturday morning. Or it could be like the yogurt shop murders in Texas, where at least one man, some people think it was more than one, went into the yogurt shop and just had the opportunity. He was a predator, and he had the opportunity with these girls working there alone. And so he took the opportunity to hold them at gunpoint, SA one or more of them, and then he set the place on fire. I'm trying to think what other possibilities, if it's not somebody who knew one of these women, if it's not the one who survived being in on it and they were just going to do a robbery and something went wrong, just a random serial killer, mass killer. Because if he was just a robber, if he just trying to find a quick place to rob to get some money, like a drug addict or something, he would not have spent a long time in the store. And he probably wouldn't cared about killing everybody there to not leave witnesses. He would have just took the money, maybe shot one or two of them, but he would have just ran out. So I'm going to assume if he SA'd at least one of them, that he is a predator, that he could have had hatred for women, and that he was there more than just to rob. But let's say also if he was like a hired assassin, like one of these women had a husband, I believe maybe two or three of them were married, that like a husband had an insurance policy on his wife, and so he hired somebody to kill him, and he wanted it to look like they was just killed in a store robbery, and it just ended up a lot of people happened to be at the store, so they all had to be shot. Could it have been something like that? Could a spouse of one of these women have been involved in hiring somebody to murder them, and then just all of them ended up having to be killed so they couldn't be a witness? I mean, there have been crimes where, like, the victim was only one intended victim, but the criminal took out several people just to not have witnesses. So it could be something like that. If it's not just a random predator, serial killer who just killed for the heck of it, then it has to be somebody who knew one of these women at least who was involved. Now back to the coworker theory, where the coworker who survived was setting up like her coworker, the store manager and stuff, and she didn't realize at the time of the robbery how many customers would be in the store. And so all these women were just collateral damage. They were just, people do survive, being shot. And maybe the killer didn't realize that he left the victim alive because, by that time he was ready to move on and get out of the store and get away before the police came. So he just rushed out after that and didn't realize that she was still alive. But she was very, very lucky, and that does happen. So I'm not saying, I think she was involved. I'm just saying it's possible, just from my personal life experience, that, you know, can't necessarily trust your coworkers. And now, regarding the time I got robbed when I was young, working at a pizza place, that crime was never solved. I never had to go to court or anything. They never caught anybody, so there's never, it was never solved. I guess, robberies happen all the time, even though it was new to me that robberies happen all the time, and that, nobody gets killed is not a big deal, or shot is not a big deal. But of course, it was a big deal to all of us who had guns pointed at us. So, I still wish that the police would give out more information about this case, and that the survivor would come forward. Even anonymously, she can still remain anonymous, but just somehow get information out to the public. Because, wouldn't she want this crime to be solved? Wouldn't she? And also, she could have been the victim who was SA'd. I'm not sure if it was one of the ones who got shot and killed was SA'd, or if the surviving victim was the one who got SA'd. And maybe that's why she was like the last one shot, and that's why she's survived. Because I'm not sure exactly what order all this went down. I'm hoping after the documentary I will know more about how this crime took place. But I just keep thinking that the surviving victim knows more than what is out there. But it could be that the police know everything, but they just haven't released it. Like she's not involved, but she was able to give them more information. Maybe for her own safety, they kept it quiet. And also, I was thinking, was there really did somebody really get SA'd? Was it just a surviving victim who said that she got SA'd? And could that have not been the truth if she wasn't telling the true story about what happened, if she was in on it? So we just don't know. Is there actual physical evidence that somebody got SA'd, or the police just think that maybe one of the women was disrobed or not fully clothed, or something? What makes them think that they were SA'd? Do they know that for sure? Why won't they just say, oh, we have DNA evidence? I know police hold back information a lot of times so that when they interview suspects, they'll have information that only the perp would know. But since it's been this long, shouldn't they at least say, oh, we have DNA evidence, we're testing it, or we're retesting for touch DNA, or, whatever. So it's just odd that in this day and age, and after it's been so long, the police won't release more information. So either they don't have nothing, or they just don't think that they should release it for whatever reason, or they really messed up this case, and whatever they think, they can't solve it because they messed up the evidence way back then. So I don't know, but this case isn't solved. These 5 women lost their lives. Several of them were mothers with young children, and their families were left devastated. This devastated the whole community from what I've read. It was a big deal there in Tinley Park, Illinois. And it like shook the whole community, and people never thought the same way, or when they went out shopping, they never just took their safety for granted anymore. I found a website. It's called The Dissenting Democrat. It says Scott L. Costello, April 14th, 2026. And it says a new theory of the Lane Bryant killer, the botched robbery theory, does not hold water. So this man doesn't think it's a botched robbery. He, I guess, assumes it was a sexual predator. And what his background is, I don't know, but I found this interesting. So he talks about the jeans that the perp was apparently wearing. It says, one detail of his appearance that deserves attention are his jeans. The survivor described black jeans with cursive embroidered lettering on the back pockets, consistent with either Girard or G-Unit brand denim. This is an informative detail for several reasons. In my research by February 2008, both brands were past their peak cultural moment. Girard jeans had dominated urban fashion in the late 1990s and early 2000s, before declining sharply by mid-decade. G-Unit brand clothing, launched by 50 Cent following the success of the 2003 album Beg for Mercy, had a similarly concentrated cultural window of approximately 2003 to 2007. A grown man still wearing either brand in February 2008 was likely in his late 20s to late 30s. He was old enough to have been fully immersed in that cultural moment at its peak. Bringing them into older age meant that they were closely tied to his identity that he wanted to project to others. It also says something beyond fashion. G-Unit as a brand was enmeshed with musical content, and that content, particularly the Beg for Mercy era material, was filled with themes of dominance of and contempt for women and the glorification of violence as masculine. A man who wore that brand on the day he carried out these murders was not making a neutral clothing choice. He was projecting his social identity. The imagery of that world, the control, the dominance, the objectification, the brutality for show, have been absorbed over years and was expressed in what he said and did inside Lane Bryant. The fact that the surviving victim was able to see and recall the embroidered G on the jeans under extreme duress shows the effectiveness of his display. So the picture of the jeans. Wow, so this guy really goes in depth with his theory of the mindset of the killer. Very well could be, or it could just be the just jeans that he had and he put on and he didn't think anything of it. I don't know if you could really read too much into what he was wearing, but he could be right. Says a sequence of events that's available in the public domain. It was a Saturday morning. Lane Bryant had just opened at 10 a.m. in the Brookside Marketplace, a strip mall at 191st in Harlem in Tinley Park, Illinois, just off Interstate 80. The store was holding a clearance sale. 2 employees were present when a tall, husky man entered through the back door carrying a stack of papers, posing as a delivery driver. So, I mean, he went all out to pose as a delivery driver. So was he just a sexual predator wanting to get in the store to see what women were there? And of course he had a gun on him, so he was prepared for whatever he had to do. So maybe he did plan this. He just wanted to be a predator and get to women. So that's why he chose the Lane Bryant store Saturday morning. Okay, and I don't know if the information on this website is accurate, but this man says that he chatted with the staff for approximately 15 minutes. The store manager, Rhoda McFarland, grew suspicious. No deliveries were scheduled on Saturday. She called another Lane Bryant to verify. The call confirmed her suspicion. At that point, he drew a .40 caliber Glock semi-automatic pistol. He bound all 6 women, 2 employees, and 4 customers with duct tape he had brought with him. He forced them face down into the back room. He retrieved store underwear and placed it over the faces of some of the victims. He essayed one of them. I suspect that when one woman, Connie Woolfolk, physically resisted his groping, she scratched him hard enough to draw blood. He responded by beating and pistol whipping her. Rhoda McFarland, using Woolfolk's resistance as a distraction, managed to call 911 via a Bluetooth headset. The call was received at 10:44 a.m. So, wow. So he spent a good amount of time in there. Whether the groping occurred in one of the first 4 victims or was in the second wave, and whether Woolfolk's physical resistance was specifically in response to being groped herself, remains unconfirmed in the public record. The true crime site unresolved.me presents a sequence of events that is not supported by the public record and seems to minimize fondling, even though that may not be their intent. The fact is that fondling is sexual battery, and yes, it is. Anybody puts their hands on you in a sexual way is sexual battery. I mean, I don't know what the specific laws are in each state, but it appears that the killer became aware of the call Rhoda was making to the police. He said, "That's what you do, huh? Then be a hero, huh? Then want to be a hero? Goodbye." And that's apparently what is heard in the 911 call. He shot all 6 women in the back of the head, execution style, and walked out. So apparently that's how the 6th victim was able to survive. Right after that, he rushed out because one of them had made the 911 call, so that's when he shot them. Okay, so I wasn't clear on that before, so if this information is right, then, the 6th victim just got lucky because he didn't stay around to see if they were all dead. Ooh, that's harsh. That's a brutal psychopath. It sounds like he just walked in just to be a predator and shot them without a care in the world. A Tinley Park police officer was in the adjacent Target parking lot. He arrived within 2 minutes. The gunman was already gone. Well, no, he wasn't in the store, but he was somewhere in the area because you can't just get away too far within a couple of minutes. It's just that nobody saw him, apparently, that he was missed. Let's see, Rhoda McFarland, 42, of Joliet, Jennifer Bishop, 34, of South Bend, Indiana, Carrie Hudek Chiuso, 33, of Frankfort, Sarah Szafranski, 22, of Oak Forest, Connie Woolfolk, 37, of Flossmoor. All 5 were dead. The 6th woman survived due to the bullet trajectory and then lying still. No arrest has been made. The case is still open. The reward stands at $100,000. Wow. So now, it sounds like to me the 6th victim couldn't have been involved, that she just got lucky because he immediately ran out. But not necessarily. But if she was involved, why would he be SAing one or more of the women there, fondling them? So maybe that's why they don't have physical DNA. He fondled them. So unless the police have the women's clothing to maybe look for touch DNA or something like that, in today's present time, they may not have any physical DNA. So the botched robbery theory does not hold. From the beginning, official public statements framed the killings as a robbery gone wrong. Money and jewelry were taken, therefore, the hypothesis went. This was a robbery that escalated into homicide when things got out of control. Another hypothesis was that the killer was seeking revenge against perhaps one victim and the others were collateral damage. I do not find either hypothesis credible. I want to explain why, because the framing matters. If investigators cling to the wrong motivational hypothesis, they search for the wrong type of person in the wrong places, using the wrong behavioral criteria. Here is what the botched robbery hypothesis requires you to ignore or explain away. The store had $400 in total cash. That's not a lot of money, but would somebody who come in there to rob them know that if he wasn't familiar with the store? Anyone with basic retail knowledge would know that a women's clothing store at opening on Saturday carries almost no cash. The financial reward was negligible considering the level of the risk involved. Sally Beauty Supply next door probably had more cash in the register. Yes, it is interesting why he chose Lane Bryant specifically. He brought duct tape. Robbers do not bring duct tape. You bring duct tape when you plan to restrain people for an extended period. I would agree with that. That sounds plausible. That sounds true. His plan always included extended control of victims. Wow. He wore no mask, and that is scary. He wore no mask, so he didn't care if anybody saw him because he already knew what he was going to do. That's one reason why maybe he didn't wear a mask. Professional, semi-professional, and even amateur robbers wear masks. He did not. The only rational explanation is that he never intended to leave witnesses who could identify him. He started to SA one victim. Robbers do not stop to commit sexual assault, full stop. Their goal is quick cash, not to linger around for 45 minutes and perform how he did. He retrieved store underwear and placed it over the faces of victims. This required leaving the victims, walking to the merchandise area, selecting intimate apparel, returning, and applying it. This took time in an already extremely high-risk situation. It produced no financial gain, no tactical advantage, and no escape benefit. The only framework in which this behavior is rational is a sexual fantasy framework where the act was a required element of the enactment he had planned. He remained on site for an estimated 35 to 45 minutes. The first imperative of robbery is speed. Extended dwell time is not a robbery behavior. It is a predatory control behavior. What he's saying makes sense. He walked out calmly, a man who just killed 5 people, and walked to his car without apparent panic is not someone overwhelmed by what happened. So he got away in a car. I wasn't sure if they thought he just walked away and disappeared into another store or whatever, went out the back or the front, but apparently it's believed that he left in a car. He is someone who finished something. Every single one of these behaviors is inconsistent with the botched robbery theory. Every single one is consistent with a sexually motivated, premeditated, predatory offense. The underwear alone is sufficient to reframe this case. Think about what that act required. He had to walk to the merchandise, choose intimate apparel specifically, which is not very adequate if your goal is to cover someone's eyes, return to the victims, apply it to specific people. He apparently did not apply to all victims. Every one of those steps burned time he did not have in a location 30 seconds from a police officer. He did it anyway. But did he know a police officer was nearby? That means his compulsion to perform that act outweighed every rational self-preservation instinct. That is not robbery behavior, that is fantasy enactment behavior. In other words, his desire to see the women humiliated with underwear on their head while bound and duct taped outweighed any fear or concern of getting caught. Well, that makes sense. That makes sense. The killer is likely a psychopathic sadist. Robert Hare's decades of research on psychopathy identifies several core traits that appear in the behavioral record of this offense. Flat or reduced emotional affect under conditions that would produce extreme arousal, anxiety in the average person, grandiose self-concept, the genes and associated music, contempt for others, impaired fear response that allows the individual to take extreme risks, performative behavior driven by an internal perspective rather than external social norms. It is possible that he took photos of the victims with underwear on their head using a cell phone or a small pocket camera. All of these are present in this crime. He maintained a delivery ruse for 15 minutes under mild suspicion. He controlled 6 women in an enclosed space. He committed a SA. He issued theatrical taunts before executing 5 people, intending 6. He walked away. Physical sex may not be as arousing to him as humiliation, power, and control. I listened to the 911 recording several times, enhanced with AI to remove background noise and amplify the sound of his voice. When the killer says that I'm losing it, he does not sound distressed. He sounds at his baseline controlled. That was not an expression of panic. That is reduced autonomic arousal, a measurable psychophysiological characteristic of psychopathic individuals, documented extensively in Hare's research. An assaulter's clinical interviews with predatory offenders and predators describe this quality with examples and in depth. Offenders who describe committing acts of extreme violence report feeling calm, focused, and in some cases describe the event as pleasurable. The violence does not feel the way it would feel to you or me. To the killer, it likely felt like satisfaction. His primary motivation was sexual power and domination. Okay, so I'm not going to read the whole thing. I will link all this below this video so you can go and read more about this case yourself and read this website. I will say it's very interesting. I'm not familiar with this man, so he could be famous for something, but I don't know him. Let me click and let's see. The Dissenting Democrat, a progressive perspective grounded in critical inquiry, evidence-based analysis, and truth over tribalism, challenging mainstream stuff and blah, blah, blah. Okay, so maybe, obviously maybe like mostly a political writer, but he also writes on other topics. I just happened to find him. Don't care whether he's Democrat or Republican or whatever. I just thought his website was interesting regarding this case. I don't know anything about him. I'm just into true crime, not politics. But let me go down to the bottom to read this part. It says, what the evidence supports. I want to be thorough in the same way I was in my analysis of Ellen Greenberg's case. The behavioral profile is not speculation. It is the most solid explanation for the totality of publicly available evidence. And that's important here, publicly available evidence. There could be other evidence that the police are withholding that would help give this guy even more information to determine what he actually thinks about this case. I do not use Bayesian analysis in this case as I did for Ellen Greenberg, but I do rely on base rates and percentages from experts. See works consulted below. Here is how the evidence maps out into my hypothesis. Store selection. Lane Bryant exclusively serving plus-size women, 90% supported of targeted predatory offense rather than opportunistic robbery. That makes sense. Lane Bryant is a women's store. But, it could also be that a robber who wanted money would think that women would be easier victims than, say, going into a hardware store with a bunch of men. No mask worn. 85% supportive of pre-planned homicidal intent from the moment of entry. I will say that from my life experience, the time I got robbed at a Primo's Pizza, they weren't wearing masks, but they were in and out so quick. I mean, I can still picture them in my mind, but they were never caught. So just because they weren't wearing masks doesn't necessarily mean, just because this perp wasn't wearing a mask doesn't necessarily mean that he wasn't there to rob. But more so what makes me think he wasn't there to just rob was that he stayed so long. Duct tape brought to the scene, 90% supportive of pre-planned extended victim control. Sexual assault of one victim, 95% supportive of sexual motivation as primary driver. Use of store underwear on victims' faces, 75% supportive of pre-planned fantasy prop. The compulsion over risk ratio alone establishes sexual motivation at approximately 95%. So this guy's really into statistics. But I will say that, yeah, the underwear, why did he use the underwear? Why did he not put duct tape on their mouths or over their eyes or whatever? He'd already duct taped them or had somebody else duct taped them, like one of the victims. Maybe he had one of the victims duct tape the other 5, and then he duct taped the 6th victim or something. So yeah, using underwear was weird to cover their faces. I mean, wouldn't you? Duct tape would be, it would keep, their eyes blocked and their mouths covered so they couldn't scream or whatever. So $400 total cash taken, 85% supportive of secondary gain rather than primary robbery motivation. That makes sense. Extended dwell time 35 to 45 minutes. Yeah, this guy makes sense in everything he's saying. Theatrical language on 911 recording. Flat vocal effect during execution. So I'm just going to read the reasons why he thinks it's not just a robbery gone bad. Disproportionate violence against Woolfolk specifically. Then he gets percentages. Calm departure after 5 murders, or 6 murders, so he thought. Well-groomed presentation, manicured nails, deliberate ornamentation. Okay, so I didn't know that he was considered to be well-groomed or had manicured nails. So weighted across all 12 categories, the publicly available evidence supports this formulation at approximately 80%. Meanwhile, the botched robbery or revenge hypothesis or hit jobs reliably explain almost none of the same evidence to a degree over 5 to 20%. So this guy's main theory when he weighs the evidence is that it was a sexual predator that committed this crime, which totally makes sense. So who he probably is, according to this website, the physical description is well established: an African American male aged 25 to 35 in 2008, meaning 43 to 53 today. He was around 6 feet to 6 feet 2 inches. He had a husky build with broad shoulders, a medium to dark complexion, and cornrows with one decorative braid on the right cheek adorned with 4 light green beads. He had well manicured nails. He was wearing a dark waist-length jacket and black jeans with cursive embroidered lettering on the back pockets, consistent with Gabbard, I don't know if I'm saying that right, or G Unit brand. Behaviorally, he is very likely working class and familiar with freight, distribution, or warehousing based on his convincing delivery ruse and the freight dense I-80, I-94 corridor. He has a regular braider who created he maintained a distinctive style that required ongoing access to a skilled salon. He has or had manicured nails, suggesting a nail service provider. Both relationships are in his community. Geographically, the evidence points toward the Gary Hammond, Indiana corridor as the most probable residential area, approximately 35 to 40 minutes from Tinley Park via I-80-94. The state line advantage Indiana's more permissive firearms laws in 2008, the cultural demographic fit, the freight industry infrastructure, and the buffer zone principle from geographic profiling research all converge on this area. Park Forest and the South Cook County corridor are secondary possibilities. Indiana is a crossroads of America, and Gary is very possible location for him to reside at the time of the killing. So this guy is very specific and very sounds educated on all of these statistical probabilities and stuff. So maybe he's right. He is almost certainly still alive and continues to live within 50 miles of where he was in 2008. Psychopathic sadists with strong community ties and working class profiles tend to remain rooted geographically. Wow. So this person could still be living very close to where all this happened. But the only thing that makes me think, well, maybe this particular website, this man's opinion could be wrong, is would somebody who did a crime like this just stop? Wouldn't he have committed other similar crimes? And if he stayed in the same area, wouldn't they be in the same area or near there, unless he's a truck driver anywhere in the US and he's never been caught? Could this person be in prison for something else and the police don't have DNA, so they don't know that they have him in prison? I just don't see a man like this who does something like this in 2008 not being in prison or dead today, because it seems like he would have had to carry on. He couldn't stop himself unless just one big crime or other smaller crimes that he committed and he was able to get away with. He just lives with those fantasies and doesn't need or have the urge to go out and do this again. It's possible, there have been killers caught decades later who committed awful crimes, but apparently they didn't do anything in between that the police can prove anyway. So that's scary to think he's just there living somewhere among people and they have no idea. Okay, so this guy on this website says he may have offended again. If he did, the behavioral signature, sexual contact with a bound victim, use of intimate apparel, disproportionate rage in response to resistance would likely appear in those offenses as well. See, that's why I don't understand. Wouldn't the police have, figured that out? Well, maybe not the Tinley Park police. Maybe they're not sharing enough information. Maybe that's the problem. He probably has kept the jewelry but spent the money. Perhaps a casino as his lucky bills. He probably still has the jeans, but may not wear them any longer. Wow. Then he goes on to about what the investigators should know and all that. So anyway, that's it for this video. There's, a lot more websites and videos, of course, on this topic of the Lane Bryant murders. But I think we've covered all of the important information that's out there for the public. So the next thing I want to do regarding this case is just find that documentary and watch it to see what else I can learn about this case. But anyway, like this guy says on his website, if you have any information about this case, please contact the Tinley Park Police Department tip line at 708-444-5394 or email lanebryant.tipline@tinleypark.org. And remember, there is a $100,000 reward, and you don't necessarily have to get a conviction to get that money. So if you know anything and you're not the person involved, then let the police know, because you can get $100,000. And who doesn't need $100,000 in today's time? So that's it. Thank you for watching this video, and I'll talk to you next time.